Okay, hi everybody. I'm Alan Rippin, the director for the Center for Active Living at Athens Community Council on Aging. Welcome back. This is part 3 of our series, The Changes Dementia Brings, with Conrad. It's been such a good series. Cloud, nice to have you back. Always such good information and just love having you. Today we're talking about how to overcome dementia symptom-related behaviors. So I know you have a big presentation for us on that. And just for anyone new joining today, Cloud is a dementia caregiver training specialist and also the author of the Dementia Field Guide. I just always like to give a plug because it's such a fabulous resource for folks. I just couldn't recommend it more. It's really, really well thought out, a thoughtful account and information for people. So glad you put that out there for us, Cloud.
Thanks, Alan.
Yeah, so let's just jump right in. Go ahead and take it away, and we'll check back later with questions.
Sure, glad to do that. I come to this information from a very personal standpoint. I was twice a family caregiver, my stepfather and my father as well. And when I was in the process of caregiving, I know I felt so much fear, frustration, and failure when caregiving, particularly for my father, for whom I was very hands-on. I vowed that one day I would help other caregivers navigate their journey with more confidence and competence than I experienced in that moment. And that was the impetus for my leaving my career in marketing and advertising and starting my company, New Street Compass, which trains dementia caregivers, both professional and family caregivers, and also the impetus for writing the Dementia Field Guide. I remember thinking one day at my father's assisted living facility when I was visiting him, why is there no manual for this? Why is there no manual? And so now there is a manual, the Dementia Field Guide. I also do a great deal of volunteer work for the Alzheimer's Association, which is very beneficial, I think, in the community, but also is very beneficial for me because each person's, if someone has dementia, their case of dementia is as individual as their pinky print. No two cases of dementia are the same. And so the more that I work with people and hear their anecdotal stories, the more it broadens my own experience so that I can help others. Okay, enough about me. Thank you so much for being here. Let's dive right in. If you haven't noticed, I use a topographic kind of theme for or metaphor for the way I describe the work that I do. So our trail map for today really is our learning objectives. We'll talk about why symptoms escalate. Then I'll share with you my concept for an orientation to caregiving, which is the Dementia Caregiver Compass. We will talk about how that impacts a compass response template that I advise my clients to use, and it seems to be beneficial to them in their work with their own family member or client. And then we will talk about navigating escalations to restore balance, which is basically using the compass response template and applying that in some scenarios that are tend to be rather common across all the people that I work with, and that is generally recognized kind of scenarios in the community. And at the end, we'll have some time for questions. We may not get through all of the scenarios. I want to make sure that we reserve plenty of time in the end for questions. But let's dive right in. Why symptoms escalate. I want to focus our attention today on really the limbic system. In my other talks, I talk a great deal about all of the different cognitive functions which are affected by dementia and how that plays out and can lead to symptoms. But really, at the end of the day, for purposes of our discussion about navigating dementia-related behaviors and escalations that can occur, I want to really focus on the limbic system. And the limbic system is more or less in the center of my brain. Wait a minute, let me back up. What are we looking at? This illustration is representative of a scan of the brain called a positron emission tomography scan. And this is really just a slice of the brain. At this particular slice, oops, I'm sorry about that. On this particular slice, to orient you, the top of the illustration is the forehead. And then as we move down the side, you can see the indentation where the temple is. And then going around to the bottom of the illustration represents the very back of the head, sort of where, in this case, where between the point in the back of your head and where your hairline stops right above your neck. And positron emission tomography will take slices at different areas of the brain, so to speak. So this one is particularly where the temple indentations are at their greatest. What does the positron emission tomography scan measure? It measures metabolic processes in the brain that correlate to brain activity. And I like to use the analogy when I show this illustration of the weather map that's on the back of USA Today. I'm thinking the last week's hurricane over in the East Coast, Elsa. And if you were monitoring through USA Today what the rainfall predictions were in your area and in other areas of the East, or even the West for that matter, since they're having great drought and wildfires out there and unprecedented heat, then the way that that's represented on that map on the back of USA Today is that the greatest, let's say, rainfall in this case is depicted by dark red areas on that map. And then conversely, in areas that are expecting no rainfall, those would be blue or purple areas of that map. And it would be similar with heat, with temperatures and the like. But anyway, in this, with positron emission tomography, your PET scans, as they are often called, the PET name is PET scans, we see the greatest deal of brain activity as correlated by metabolic processes being represented by the red areas, and then progressively the orange areas and the yellow areas. And the areas of least activity in the brain are the areas that are green and blue and purple. So I want to draw your attention now to the limbic system, which is located, as I mentioned, in the center of the brain. And we will watch, as we go through the talk, I'm going to do some show comparative illustrations where we can see what happens to activity in this area of the brain over time. So the limbic system really is at the center of our cerebrum, and it is the center of the brain, and it's really where we house our survival instincts. And we typically think of survival instincts as, fight or flight, and that is very true, but it's actually a little bit more than that. The limbic system has several parts to it, about 4 parts to it. I want to focus on 2. I want to focus on the hippocampus, and I want to focus on the amygdala. The hippocampus, and these are in the very same region of the brain, and they're responsible ultimately for the very same thing, our survival. However, they are very different from each other. So the hippocampus is one area of the limbic system, and this is really the area of the limbic system that's in charge of survival by adaptation. This is the sophisticated survival area of the brain. It's really the basis of this is rational thought. Are the skills associated with the hippocampus. It's responsible for new learning and wayfinding and layers of time. Now we know new learning, if you know anything about the dementia, you probably are aware that one of the earliest areas typically affected by dementia is going to be the hippocampus, where we perform new learning there. We retain we have short-term recall. We make new learning, and we form new memories in the hippocampus. And this is typically an area of the brain where skill is lost very early in dementia and in cognitive impairment. And it's one of the reasons why many people believe that Alzheimer's and dementia is synonymous with memory loss. Really and truthfully, Alzheimer's and all dementias are responsible for much more than memory loss. But because memory loss is the first thing that typically occurs, the first thing that we typically notice, then many people believe that those two, that memory loss and dementia are synonymous. Well, dementia really involves thinking and behavior, as we've discussed in our past talks, and we will talk about a little more in today's talk as well. So it's based in rational thought. The skills are new learning, wayfinding. This may not be so obvious to you, and layers of time. Wayfinding is navigating, and that involves our ability to, is involved with short-term memory, to remember not only where we need to go, but where we just came from. Where we just came from is an important part of navigating. I'm here, I got here, now what do I do next? And also layers of time, which may not be so obvious as well, separating past from present from future. And you may have heard, or you may have noticed in a loved one that's living with cognitive impairment, that it's not uncommon that you would be having a conversation with someone with cognitive impairment, and all of a sudden, mid-sentence, they'll switch to something that happened 20 years ago, or they will start talking to people today, or include them in the conversation, who are long deceased, and they will be talking about situations that happened decades ago. So being able to separate past from present from future is something that occurs in the hippocampus. Conversely, the amygdala is also in charge of survival, as I mentioned before, but this is survival by defense, and this is really this fight or flight mechanism. The basis for this is much more emotionally driven. I sense a threat, I'm scared by the threat, and so I must react to this threat. I must respond to the threat. So it's, whereas the hippocampus is a rational operational system, the amygdala is really an emotional operational system. The skills that the amygdala are responsible for include pleasure-seeking, emotions, and then detecting and responding to threat around us. Pleasure-seeking and emotions may or may not be obvious to you as something that would belong with survival by defense, but they are. The brain being a very complex organ, it is there's more to it than meets the eye, so more than just as what is obvious to us. Now, I will say that when we are threatened, we do experience emotions in a very strong way, which is fear, threat, anxiety, and those sorts of negative emotions. When we are safe, as opposed to feeling threat, when we are safe and secure, we also experience emotions. Those would be positive emotions. For example, I'm satiated, I'm secure, I feel calm, I'm confident, nothing can stop me. So that all is happening in the amygdala. And the amygdala seeks pleasure because it is a result of surviving, and not only surviving, but thriving. Loss of skill. Typically, the amygdala stays strong until the end, and that is the body's need to protect itself and defend itself, even when and respond to threat, even when one's ability to detect threat visually or audibly or tactily becomes compromised with dementia. But the amygdala remains strong until pretty much the end. Now, when we talk about survival instincts, I tend to go back to, I think of the caveman brain. And so I want to illustrate this this dichotomy between the hippocampus and the amygdala with a caveman story. Let's suppose the caveman is out hunting, and he's trying to bring home a few hearty meals, to sustain himself, his wife, and his children. And let's say he notices a group of wildebeests clustered on the shoal of a river as he's standing at the cliff above them, surveying the land to try to see, where is my next meal coming from? So he sees the wildebeests, and he notes, these wildebeests seem to gather here at the same time of day when the sun is positioned just so in the sky. Remember, he has no wristwatch. When the sun is just so in the sky, and that if I bring my fellow cavemen, if I bring my neighbors back here tomorrow to this very spot, at this very same time, we can kill one or two wildebeests and bring home dinner meals for our family and feed our family for a week, even more perhaps. So that is the learning of new information. That is the making of new memories. It also involves that the caveman's ability to navigate his way back tomorrow with his fellow cavemen to do the hunt. and they've got to arrive at the same time of day. They've got to leave in time to get there in time for to kill the wildebeest as they gather on the riverbank there. Now, also, so he's making plans, and his mouth is beginning to water as he's thinking about this. And because it's been a while since he's had wildebeests on the spit, if you will, he's excited about the taste of the flavorful meat and smell it cooking in his imagination. And he's been longing for this celebration that he and his family will be able to enjoy, a good kill, celebrate and eat well and be satiated from that. So he's having thoughts that are involved in pleasure seeking and emotions surrounding those pleasures. And he also, but there's a question, is he so involved in thinking about the kill and eating with his family and his neighbors and celebrating the good kill? Is he so involved in those emotions that he misses the gamey scent of the saber-toothed tiger who is creeping up behind him? Does he hear the crackling of the leaves as the saber-toothed tiger is about to pounce on him? Can he turn in time and stab his spear into the saber-toothed tiger to survive, to defend himself so that he can come back tomorrow and kill the wildebeest and feed his family so that they can all survive? So that is sort of the dichotomy of the hippocampus and the amygdala and how they function together, really, to survive by adaptation and to survive by defense. Now, we've talked a little bit about some need here, although I haven't really called it out as such. You may or may not be aware of a behavioral scientist by the name of Abraham Maslow. He devised, through his studies in the 40s and 50s, he identified a hierarchy of need, which we've referred to as Maslow's hierarchy of need. And he believed, other behavioral scientists, some feel that there are more than just the 5 needs that Maslow identified. However, they all agree that these 5 needs are universal. We all share them as humans. And these needs do not diminish with age, or they don't diminish with dementia either. And they are not only needs that allow us to survive, like our caveman, but also to thrive. And so the 2 most basic that are really objective in nature, they really are measured in rational ways, specific tangible units, are physiological needs and safety needs. Am I warm? Am I safe? Do I have enough to eat? Do I have enough to drink? They are, as I mentioned, these 2 are very objective in nature. They're very tangible. They're very easy to measure. And then and they are really in charge of our survival needs. And then the needs that allow us to thrive are belonging and value, having a sense of value for ourselves and feeling valued by others, as well as having a sense of purpose in life. And these 3 needs are, whereas the first 2 are more care-based needs, physiological needs and safety needs, or we tend to think of as, when we care for others, where they're children or parents or a spouse or sibling. The thriving needs, belonging, value, and purpose, these are really identity-based needs. They are subjective in nature. They are difficult to measure, and when we do measure them, we think about them in emotional terms, intangible terms, and so they're very identity-based needs. But all of them, once again, are universal. We all share them. Some behavioral scientists don't think that they belong in a hierarchical order, that you don't need to satisfy the physiological and safety needs before you can address the belonging and the value and the purpose needs. But Maslow felt that they belonged in a hierarchical order, and that is why he developed this pyramid and why I'm showing you this information in a pyramid format right now. Now, so need fulfillment, we talked about our caveman, and he is able to fulfill his needs. He has the will to feed his family. He also needs the power and the ability in order to get back to that place the next day and to successfully hunt the wildebeest. A person who has all of their cognitive skills intact has willpower and ability, like our caveman, in equal proportions. They're equally footed, and that is how the caveman not only has the will to feed his family, but he is able to feed his family as well. A person living with dementia, however, is losing a lot of cognitive skill in various areas of the brains that we talked about primarily in part one of this series. And as he loses power and ability, as they become subordinated to will, his ability or her ability to fulfill their own needs autonomously, independently, becomes uncertain. And so people living with dementia become dependent on others to help them fulfill their needs. Will becomes exaggerated relative to power and ability. And that is really the root of the matter when we think about the escalations of dementia-related symptoms that can occur sometimes. A person with dementia is attempting to either fulfill a need or express to you that they have a need that is unmet, that needs to be fulfilled. But because of the cognitive changes in their brain, they're unable to either fulfill the need independently or express it to a caregiver. And so that is really the root, I believe, of why dementia's symptoms escalate. I have a little formatting issue here. Healthy is not on one line as it should, but I mentioned to you that I was going to show you the PET scans compared to each other to help illustrate these points. And so the left-hand illustration here is the one that I showed you previously. It is the illustration of a healthy brain with no cognitive impairment. And we notice a lot of red in the healthy brain on this particular slice. It's demonstrating cognitive activity in various areas of the brain that relates to 8 of the key cognitive functions that we perform in the cerebrum. The illustration in the center is the early stage illustration, PET scan of the same brain in early stage. And we can see, if we are looking at particularly the limbic system, we can see that it appears that the limbic system is even more active in the early stages of dementia than it was when that particular person's brain was entirely healthy. One of the reasons for this is that as cognitive loss occurs in the other areas of the brain, for example, our ability to process visual information, our ability to process auditory information, our ability to process tactile information, our ability to look at data, analyze data, make decisions based on that data, weigh consequences, implement plans associated with the decisions we made about that data. As all of those cognitive skills become compromised when cognitive impairment is in play, then the amygdala kind of takes over, and it is more concerned with the survival aspects of living than it was previously. And also I would add that, we talked about emotions being part of the limbic system, particularly the amygdala. When a person is less able to detect visual threat, less able to detect auditory threat, like our caveman, could he, and sensory input, could he smell the saber-toothed tiger? Could he hear the leaves crackling behind him? When a person is less able to detect threat around them, they are going to become more anxious, and that's going to create more activity, more involvement of the amygdala, the emotions surrounding anxiety, and also the ability to survive by defending oneself. Now, in late stage, in this illustration over here on the right, where we see a great deal of blue and purple, which is reflecting a low amount of metabolic processes which correlate to cognitive activity in the brain. It's almost as if they're the only activity, not entirely so, but a great deal of the activity that is still happening cognitively is happening in the limbic system, with the amygdala in particular. And so I just wanted to present this visual so that you can, have a way of seeing it in your head, how these cognitive changes are causing one's survival instincts to become stronger over time. Common factors for escalation fall into 3 categories, really: physical, which we'll talk about first, then environmental, and then emotional. And the physical and the environmental factors for escalation really relate to the physiological and the safety, sense of safety of a person. They really revolve around those rational measures of whether or not needs are being met. So the physical ones are hunger and thirst, the need to eliminate waste from the body, constipation, being tired, having difficulty breathing, experiencing pain. Somewhere along the way, my font got increased, and that should say detected or undetected, as well as infection. Interestingly enough, as the body loses cognitive skill, it also loses the ability to detect pain, and it also loses the ability, this is gradual, not early stage problem, but loses the ability to fight infection. And so people that are in late stage dementia tend to experience a great deal of infection. And it tends to occur, it may be a head cold or flu. It is, in my father's case, I can speak to this, and his experience is not uncommon. Because he was wearing continence garments, and because his body was experiencing a loss of the ability to fight infection, he would tend to have a lot of urinary tract infections in late stage dementia, which caused escalations because there was a pain that he couldn't really express to others, but that was causing inflammation and stress in his body. Environmental factors, and these are very tangible and often very easy to correct, such as the lighting in the room or the temperature in the room. Is it too dark in here? Is it too cold or too hot in here? Is the air stuffy in here? What about noise levels? Or is there too much commotion in this room? Overstimulation, unstimulation, and then also unwanted touch. And I touched on this in part one of the series, but a person with dementia, their visual processing systems, as they are affected by cognitive impairment, a person loses, among other ways to detect visual data, a person loses their peripheral vision gradually and steadily until in the late stages of dementia, a person is effectively looking through a monocle, and so they cannot, but even when the person is losing cognitive or losing peripheral vision beyond, just sort of a circle around their head, bordered by their shoulders in each direction, they're maybe unable to detect someone approaching them from the side. So if you've ever noticed that your loved one, for example, or your client in caregiving was startled when you approached them from the side and maybe touched them on the shoulder, this is why they didn't see you coming. They weren't prepared for the touch that you just administered to them. And then emotional, and these are more difficult to measure, and they are more difficult to fulfill emotional needs, or to transform escalations that are emotionally driven into positive emotions. Emotional anger, fear, sorrow, isolation, hopelessness, frustration, and lack of purpose. And really, even when we think about the physical needs, looking at this first one here, hunger and thirst, I don't know if you recall, a couple of years ago, there was a campaign on television, an ad campaign on television for Snickers, the candy bar. And Betty White was the protagonist, I suppose, in this campaign. And the whole theme line was, you're not yourself when you're hungry. It goes, touches on that hangry phenomenon. When we're hungry, we might be grumpier, we might be mean, we might snap at people, simply because we're hungry. We have an unfulfilled need that's not met. And so there are emotions associated with the higher order needs, having a sense of belonging. That would, if we lack a sense of belonging, that would probably equate to feelings of isolation, or having a sense of feeling valued, or having a sense of purpose might equate to feelings of hopelessness. But even the most basic needs have emotions associated with them. And at the end of the day, dementia caregiving is really all about transforming negative emotions into positive ones through the way that we interact with our loved one or our client. I will now point out to you, and this is what I just touched on a minute ago, there are emotional needs, negative and positive, associated with all of these universal human needs that Maslow identified. Physiological would be distress, on the negative side, distress, safety, fear, abandonment. There's really not a typo, it's just the size of my font today. Being associated, or isolation associated with belonging, hopelessness and usefulness. And then once we are able in our caregiving to transform those negative needs to positive needs and positive emotions by the meeting the fulfillment of those needs, then we can help a person with dementia experience calm and confidence and a sense of inclusion and happiness and purposefulness, which is possible even in late stage dementia. Now, I will talk with you for a minute about the Dementia Caregiver Compass, which really is a summary of all of the information I've just shared with you. So the Dementia Caregiver Compass has 4 main points on it, just like a normal compass. And I'll back up for a minute and say that a compass is something that we use to find our way, to navigate. A compass is something that helps us get from where we are now to a desired or an intended destination. A compass helps us stay on path, even when the destination falls out of view, as it often will if we are, say, hiking. You know, the topography of the land will mask our destination from view because of, you know, the nature of hills and valleys and such. Well, the Dementia Caregiver Compass is an intention, allows us an orientation that will help us as caregivers reach our intended destination, which is metaphorically speaking, which is restoring calm and a sense of well-being to our person who is living with dementia. So it's a way to orient our caregiving in order to get us from here to there. And the points on our compass are N, E, W, and S as well. They stand for needs, emotions, will, and symptoms. And I'll just go through those with you quickly again. Our humans are all bonded by universal needs that remain strong throughout our lives, even if cognitive impairment becomes present there. The higher order identity-based needs are subjective, intangible, and often overlooked. And it's these identity-based needs that are essential for thriving. It's simple, relatively simple, to dim the lighting in a bright room, or to meet a hunger or a thirst need, but these higher order needs are not quite so simple, and these are often the triggers for escalations that we are challenged to solve and to transform. The emotions associated with these needs, unmet needs trigger negative emotions, whereas met needs trigger positive emotions. And as I mentioned, caregiving is about transforming the negative ones to positive ones. We talked about willpower and ability being necessary to achieve needs independently, but will is subordinated will remain strong, but power and ability are subordinated. They are no longer on equal footing. And it's this imbalance that makes fulfillment of our needs, fulfillment of a person with dementia's needs uncertain. And it also creates an anxiety as a default mode when a person with dementia is uncertain of whether or not their needs will be fulfilled. And this anxiety, this default mode, is really the cause of the symptom-related behaviors that escalate. And it's important for caregivers to remember that when escalations occur, it's really the symptom-related behavior. It's not personality-driven. I was at my father's assisted living facility visiting one day, and we were in the cafeteria line, and he was ahead of me, and behind me was a stranger, and she said to me, just out of the blue, people with dementia are manipulative. And the truth is that they're not manipulative. They are using whatever skills they have left in order to help them meet their needs so that they can not only survive but also thrive. And when I started doing the training, I felt necessary in order to provide value to dementia caregivers and speak with authority. I came across the term challenging behaviors, and I really resist that term, and I encourage all caregivers to resist thinking about these escalations as challenging behaviors, because it implies that it sets up a construct where the person who is exhibiting the dementia-related behavior can correct themselves. That if they try harder, then these problems won't occur, and that's not the case at all. I mean, who is really challenged The person challenges the person with dementia. We have all of our cognitive skills and abilities, and we have the ability and the power to help them transform from unmet needs to met needs and transform the negative emotions associated with those to positive emotions. Okay, the compass response template. There are 6. So I'm so sorry, Alan. I'm sorry, all of you all. When I tested this before, all of the, I don't know if it's a Zoom thing or not, but all of these words occurred on one line. So they're a little more difficult to read right now, and I'm sorry.
Don't worry, the content's still great. You know, you're explaining everything great, so.
All right, thank you. I hope so. So there are 6 steps. It might seem daunting to think about, oh gosh, 6 steps in this template. How will I remember those? Many of them we've already talked about and are also intuitive, but I want to line them out to you so that you can, see the entire process. And as I mentioned, some of this information we've already covered, so it's not going to be 6 whole new steps for you. The first step is aligning. The second step is approach. The third step is assessing the unmet need. The fourth step is attending to that unmet need. The fifth step is analyzing, did what we try work or not work? We do that analysis all the time in our regular lives that have nothing to do with caregiving. Did what I just try work or not work? And next time this comes up, what might I change or what will I do again? And then in the case of the response template here, then anticipating, trying to think ahead to see, to know when certain triggers might occur again, to either avoid them altogether or to divert attention from them. So a little bit of information about each of these steps. Aligning, and this is one we've talked about the compass. So sorry about this. The needs, the emotions, the will, the symptoms. So all of the information that we've already talked about is going to be in green, and the information that we haven't talked about is going to be in black colored type. So 3, 2, 1. What does that mean? It means wait 3 seconds before responding anytime an escalation occurs, and that waiting 3 seconds is the difference between an intentional response and a reactive response. And all of the difference in the world can be created in escalations when we provide an intentional response. Also, waiting 3 seconds is going to help you assess what need it is that needs to be met, that's still unmet. When the 2 part of this is remembering that the definition of dementia, the dictionary definition, is that at least 2 parts of the brain are affected by dementia, and those are memory and something else. We talked about memory being very common and a very early sign, memory loss being an early sign of dementia. But when dementia is in play, it's more than just the memory loss. Some other key cognitive function is affected, impaired as well. And then the 1 is that only one of you can change. The person with dementia is doing the best that they can with the skills that remain for them. So the compass orientation, and then the 3, 2, 1. That's your alignment. Now your approach. I've talked about some of this a little bit, but I'm gonna spend a little bit of time on this. The approach involves requesting to come nearer to the person in order to help them meet their need, which is approaching from the front and request to enter personal space. Remember, the person's peripheral vision is declining there. For a 50-year-old with no cognitive impairment, they can pretty much see 180 degrees around them. Everything that's in front and to the sides. It's normal as we age that we lose some of that peripheral vision. So for a 75-year-old, there may be up to 90-degree loss in peripheral vision. That's normal. But for a person with cognitive impairment, it will eventually restrict further into, what I call a snorkel vision when you're wearing a snorkel mask or a ski mask, and then binoculars or field glasses, and then a monocle, as I've mentioned before. So it's very important that we approach the person from the front. If they have unmet needs, there's some degree of anxiety already occurring, and if we startle them by approaching them outside their peripheral vision, we're only going to make the situation worse. Also, we want to join at eye level. So Body language is very much an important part, and facial expression as well, but body language is a very important part of communication. In fact, as dementia progresses, body language and facial expression and gesture are going to become more important eventually than the words themselves. So when we are above a person living with dementia and they're already in a state of anxiety, we can be perceived as a threat. When we are at eye level, when we're equal to them, then we are perceived as less of a threat or perhaps no threat at all. If we are below them, if our body is below them and our eyes are below them, then they are dominant and we are in the subordinate position. So we're helping to protect against presenting ourselves as a possible threat in any situation, particularly with escalations where anxiety is already elevated. So we want to join at eye level or below. Requesting permission to enter personal space may be, I see you're in trouble, may I come help you? Or it may be if a person is particularly escalated or maybe further along in the progression of their dementia, we may not be able to get a response from them. They may not be able to answer our question, may I come closer to you? But at a minimum, we want to make sure we've got eye contact and they know that we're approaching them. And then, so these are request, join, and validate. Request is getting that, acknowledgement or permission to come closer. Join is our body stance as we do come closer. And then validate is allowing the person to experience their reality and also joining their reality. So, for example, if a person is highly distressed and agitated, there's snakes, and our response should not be, what are you talking about? So agreeing and not correcting, mirroring their disposition. If they have a distressed look on their face, then we don't want to bop in close with a smile on our face and say, what's the problem? We want to meet them at eye level, and we also want to meet them on their emotional level as well. And a great tactic that I encourage my clients to use is a yes and approach, and this is the drive behind improvisational theater, or improvisational comedy. If you know anything about improv theater, if you don't know anything about improv theater, the key point that I wanted to share with you is that improv theater, there's no script. So one of the actors just starts and says something, usually preposterous, and the next actor has to respond to that and move on with it. They can't say, what are you talking about? They have to say, yes, and, X, Y, Z, whatever it is. And the improv goes on in that way. And that's how it can get extremely ridiculous and very, very funny. I believe that there's a lot of theatrical skill involved in good caregiving, and improv skill involved in good caregiving, and specifically surrounding joining another person's reality to help them feel validated. And so yes and is a great tool to use. And this, I talked about the 3-2-1, waiting 3 seconds before responding, the waiting 3 seconds will allow you to stop and say, I can't answer, what are you talking about? There's no stakes under your chair, and coming with a yes and, yes and, this is a problem, let me help with this. Yes and, I see why you're distressed. Yes and, I would be distressed too, that sort of thing. So assessing we've talked about this, so I'm not going to belabor it at all. Assessing is figuring out if the unmet need is physical, environmental, or emotional, and then focusing attention on addressing that need, which is step 4, attending to that particular need. As we attend to the need, we want to initiate a response, which is taking agency, and we want to emphasize solidarity. So in the case of the snakes, yes, this is a problem, let me help with that. I am on your side. We are going to solve this problem together. Giving agency may be, it will help a person feel in control in an escalated situation if you allow them some decision making. And these are things that are happening just in the moment. So yes, and I see there's snakes under your chair. Will you let me help with this? may be the way that you give agency. And you're not necessarily taking agency and giving agency in every single situation, but allowing the person to feel as if they have some agency in the situation can help to reduce anxiety. If you do offer choices, offer closed-ended choices. In the case of the snakes, I would not offer a choice other than, will you let me help with this? And then that might be, we'll need to have them exterminate the room. Come with me, or maybe you're grabbing their wheelchair. Come with me. We'll go down to the nurse's station and let them know so that they can get, the exterminator out here. And we'll go somewhere else while we wait. Would you like a cup of coffee? Should we walk outside? So you're giving some choices there. That will allow the person to realize that the problem can be solved, that you're on their side, and that they do have some sense of control over the situation. And then the last one, transforming, changing the activity, changing the environment, changing the mood. When we go to the nurse's station, the visual stimuli, the auditory stimuli is going to change, and that is going to help divert or distract the person's attention from the snakes that were under their chair. And often changing the activity or changing the environment is the beginning and the middle of transforming negative emotions into positive emotions. I'll also say sometimes you can't change the environment in certain situations, but you might be able to change the mood. And music is gold in terms of helping to change the mood. I advise all my clients to have a playlist or CDs that are music that is the person's favorite kind of music when they were in their cognitive peak. So for my father, that was big band sound. So we had a lot of Glenn Miller and Artie Shaw and Tommy Dorsey that was queued up on an MP3 player. And when he was in distress over not being able to locate his wallet, for example, we'd say, this is going to take a while, so why don't we listen to some music while I help you look for your wallet. Analyzing, we talked about what worked well, what could I change next time to try to make this de-escalate the situation more effectively or faster. What should I try instead? And then anticipate, what variables can I manipulate so that we avoid this scenario altogether going forward, or how can I immediately redirect? So we quickly learned with my father, make the playlist and play the playlist. It wasn't something that we knew when we started caregiving for him, but it was a way to help divert his attention from some of the unmet needs that he experienced. So there is the template. Again, let me emphasize that we don't, and I'll show you some scenarios in a minute and you'll see, you don't necessarily have to go through all of the steps for each of the scenarios that we'll talk about here, and I'll point that out to you. So scenario one, repetitive questions, and oftentimes repetitive questions are very simple and they're very basic to answer. When are we going to the dentist? When are we going to the dentist? When are we going to the dentist? But in this particular scenario, when is Winnie coming? Did she forget about me? In this scenario, Winnie is a deceased sister to is never going to come visit. But what is the need here, do you think? Did she forget about me? I think the need here is feelings of abandonment or and perhaps isolation. So perhaps we could help, skipping ahead, perhaps we could avert this problem in the future, the scenario in the future, these feelings of abandonment by having more family members, enlisting more family members to come visit, or creating regular times. We know we're always going to have lunch on Friday, so that the person has some sense of a familiar routine and something that other caregivers can write on the calendar, visit with sister on Friday. In this scenario, Winnie is not coming back. To join this person's reality, we would not say, well, your sister died 3 years ago or 10 years ago or whatever it is. That's not joining their reality. It's not going to be helpful to remind this person that her sister has died. So instead we might say, oh, I don't know when Winnie's coming, but I miss Winnie too. let's talk about some funny stories, where when Winnie was involved, or let's look at some photo albums that have pictures of Winnie in them, and talk about how much we enjoyed her company and how dear she was to us and how much fun she was to be around, and focus on the old happy memories rather than trying to orient this sister into factual reality. So let me back up a minute with Winnie. So the need, I believe, was isolation or abandonment, and we attend to that by validating, by meeting the emotional level of this sister, and then diverting her with happier emotions associated with Winnie. And then potentially to avert or divert, in the future, we would try to create more activities that included at the other time, social engagement with either other family members or other caregivers or other people in the assisted living facility, for example. Repetitive reminiscences, and this is a very common one. When people with dementia lose the ability to carry on a conversation about things in the here and now, they will revert back in an attempt to still converse, to still enjoy feelings of belonging. They will revert back to stories from the past, things that they remember well for some reason. Old memories are retained, whereas new memories can get lost very early on in one's dementia. So in this scenario, Betsy is the daughter, and she is hearing the same story over and over and over again from her father. In fact, she heard it again yesterday, just yesterday. What is the need here? I believe it's emotional. Her father is trying to communicate. He's trying to feel like he still belongs. He's trying to participate in social activity and engage with others. And yet, because of his loss of cognitive skill, he no longer has the ability to talk in the here and now. So Betsy can validate him and help him feel like he belongs, and help him feel like he is carrying on his part of the conversation by engaging with that story. And so I advise my clients to lean into the story. You may have heard it 20 times already, but look for new details in that story that will help raise positive emotions in the storyteller, and as well as make the story a little more interesting for you. So in the case of my father, he worked in the summers in high school and in college to save up money for the muscle car. It was a blue convertible Buick, I think it was, that he was so proud of. And I heard the stories over and over and over. Well, it was a positive memory for him, and one that really, I think these older memories that people reminisce about are really represent things that, or ways in which their identity was really expressed, or ways that really shaped their identity. So, a muscle car for a man, you can see the identity connection there. And I'm not meaning to make it just about men, but he was my father, so he was male. Anyway, so I learned to ask, well, tell me how it felt the first time you drove that car with the top down. What was the day like? What was the weather like? Did you have other people in the car with you? And at a certain point, the person may not remember that there were other people in the car, but you can still ask questions about what did it feel like, because the emotions, while facts may get lost over time, emotions remain strong. I'm going to go through one more scenario with you now, and then open up for questions in case you have a scenario that you want to help us use the template to apply to that scenario. You stole my wallet. You stole my wallet. Accusations can be a very common escalation that occurs. Or you're having an affair is another accusation that typically can happen. Parse through facts and make decisions and weigh consequences and the like there. You stole my wallet. A person's wallet is very much a part of their identity and their power and their independence. And wallets tend to get put in safer and safer places as a person's dementia progresses, because they want to keep the wallet, they want to keep that sense of independence. Money, we can't get through life without money. And so the wallet goes into a safer place, and the person can't remember where it is, and then their anxiety becomes so elevated that the only way that they can explain this is that someone must have intervened and taken the wallet. So if ever you're accused of taking something, We must do our 3, 2, 1. We don't want to correct. We want to pause 3 seconds and not say, no, I didn't. Why would I steal your wallet? We want to acknowledge the person's reality, remember that at least 2 parts of their brain are dying, and join them in that reality and validate them. And so our approach here, this did happen with my father. He already knew who I was, and he saw me in the room when he was accusing me. And so I was really already within personal distance because the room was not very big at all. And so my approach was, oh my gosh, your wallet's missing again? Let me help you find it. Or may I help you find it? And so we would both start, throwing things out of the dresser. I mean, that was... It gave us an activity later to fold the things back up and put them in the dresser, but I was mirroring his sense of anxieties. I was throwing things out of the dresser too. This is awful, this is awful. And then, so the anxiety there was related to more of a physiological and a safety need. Money isn't really an emotional thing, although it did create a negative emotion. So by joining his reality and by helping him, working side by side, I allowed him the sense of safety that we had solidarity, we were going to work through this together. And then I switched on Glenn Miller. And then, I said, this is going to take a while. I already alluded to that a minute ago. This is going to take a while. Let's listen to some music while we're doing this. So I switched on the Glenn Miller. The anxiety level went down. We still didn't find the wallet. Dad, let's take a break. Let's go get a cup of coffee and we'll come back. When we come back, we can look some more. We can finish with the other dresser and take him out of the environment, divert his attention, and hopefully that can help de-escalate the situation. I will say that dementia's escalations tend to come in phases. The wallet thing went on for a couple of months. There's another scenario where a lady who moved in across the hall from him was singing. She liked to sing. That was, she couldn't really carry on a conversation, but she could still sing and remember the words to songs, which is very common in dementia, for reasons we talked about in part 1 of the series. But my father heard it differently. He didn't hear it as singing. It was very high-pitched singing, and he heard it as screaming. And so there were some escalations involved around that. He had a whole delusion cooked up in his brain about what was causing her to scream. That went on for a while. So the phases of, he got out of the wallet stealing, but then it was, they're killing people here. Can't you hear them scream? And they will continue to come up, which is why I add, analyze, and anticipate at the end of the compass template to figure out, did what I tried this time work or not? What should I try next time? As well as to try to figure out how can I circumvent this altogether? How can I keep this from happening? Or how can I short circuit this and get right to, get as quick as possible to a feeling of safety and a feeling of well-being and positive emotions. In the case of the singing, eventually I figured out that it was the singing he was misinterpreting as screaming. And when I introduced him to the new neighbor across the hall, and asked her to sing for us, and he could see and hear the shrill, tones coming out of her mouth, it didn't make the escalations go away, but it helped. We now had an explanation. And so when he, in subsequent visits, if he was in that place, I would say, let's go listen to the neighbor sing, and we could get through it that way. So I want to be mindful of our time. We've run over a little bit already, but to move directly to questions and see if there are any scenarios that you're aware of that we can help you work through, or maybe you've yourself, or maybe of a scenario that you've read about or that you've heard from someone who is working with someone with dementia that we might be able to apply this template to, or any other questions that you might have that I might be able to answer for you. So I will stop sharing so we come back to our faces and ask what I might help you solve.
Well, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I think everything you said was really wonderful, and it's funny that you touched on a lot of things that I'm dealing with, especially the repetitive stories. And they're all fabulous stories, but they're the same ones. And the way to divert and work around them is a really good idea. because I do get frustrated. But yeah, I feel like you've touched on so much, and I'll listen here if there's another question. And I just wanted to let you know how much I enjoyed that.
Oh, I'm so glad, Laurie. And just one thing to highlight there is on asking the questions, you'll never go wrong if you delve deeper into these stories by asking emotional questions. How did that make you feel? You know,
Sometimes I don't get quite I don't get an answer. I get a lot of like, oh, I like everything, or, you know, I like it all. I liked it all. There's never like, I can never get into that next step. So I have tried that sometimes, but I get a lot of just like everything. It's all my favorite.
And that's okay, because when a person is reporting, you know, it's all my favorite, I like everything, it's transforming, or it's either transforming or it's helping them to experience more pleasure in the reporting that they were having positive emotions, or that they were having them well. So that's great reinforcement, even if it doesn't help you identify new details of the story to keep it fresher for you.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Another thing I might add is think about what parts of the person's identity those persons are representative of, and then explore, are there other stories that you've heard in the past that also hone in on that same element of their identity? Might be a way to help both of you experience, you know, social engagement together in a way that keeps it interesting for you, and also, you know, calls up more positive emotions in your loved one.
Oh, that's a great idea. Thank you.
Sure.
I just love you bring so much compassion and objectivity to this whole situation, and I feel like I'm seeing things very differently after you explained some of these scenarios and what might be going on behind the scenes. It's very helpful. So I can't think of a specific scenario on my end, or haven't really had direct experience with this, but I do see it differently, which is great.
Well, I'm glad for that. There's so much that has to do with the orientation of our perspective. You know, we are compassionate, or we wouldn't be in a caregiving situation. And it's just a matter of, you know, of trying different things. And I say this in the foreword of the book, you know, I mean, I failed many times before I ever found, you know, solutions as I was a caregiver. And so it takes a while to deprogram. You know, we're used to, with our father, with our husband, with our sibling, we're used to decades of interacting a certain way and having expected responses to the stimuli we provide. And it takes a long time to deprogram from that and realize you won't get the same response this time, you know, or not only you, but, you know, just in this situation, or with these particular triggers. But one of the good things about dementia, I suppose, for caregivers is that, because we want to do well, you know, we want to solve the problems, we want the person to feel well. One of the good things is that you will have another chance. Caregivers will always get another chance, because the scenarios repeat themselves. So even if you feel like you failed today or yesterday, you will always have another chance tomorrow.
That's true.
Or this afternoon, or in the next hour.
Well, and for me too, we're not quite into the depths of the serious dementia that I can see, but I'm here every day. You know, she lives with me, so I see it every day. So I think it's a slow progression. But, you know, I feel like what you talked about is on my plate. I just haven't gotten to it yet.
Mm.
So it's interesting to have the information.
Thank you for saying that. Yes, I feel like you know, knowledge is power, and even for people who are just in the beginning stages, or not even, you know, experiencing, their person is not even experiencing dementia, it's just forgetfulness at this point, being aware of what may transpire and being equipped up front to address that and to work with a loved one is really helpful. I mean, I remember when I heard the definition of dementia, at least 2 parts of the person's brain are affected by dementia. I felt like Helen Keller at the water pump. I mean, I felt like my world changed, that I finally understood, what, like with Helen Keller, understanding what Annie was putting into her hands was words, was communication, was, eventually knowledge. And that's what I felt like. And it just opened up my world and changed everything for me. And I wish that, and my hope is that when other people gain this information, whether it's through me or through other sources, that they have that eureka moment where things start making sense and they feel less intimidated in caregiving.
Right, and less scary because, less scary because you know what's coming. Sorry, Robert.
Yeah, I have a question. When you're talking about snakes, I was really surprised. That probably surprised me more than anything else, not telling them there's no snakes. And is there a situation, and I'm just kind of thinking when somebody says something that is not real, perhaps dangerous, when do you say, yeah, don't worry about it, there's no snakes there? Is there some sort of a guideline when it is okay to correct somebody when their reality is wrong?
A great question. A question about is, to reword it, is joining that person's reality always the best choice? And what is the guideline for how do you know when it's unwise to join their reality? And is there ever a point where it's unwise? And I would say if a person's in danger of hurting themselves or in danger of hurting someone else, then we cannot join their reality. So if a person does not recognize that the burner on the stove is hot, or still hot, so I have a glass stove, so it remains hot for a period of time, well, same with any kind of stove, after the cooking or the boiling of water, for tea or whatever is over. In that scenario, we can't allow them to pretend that that is a piano. I mean, I'm just pulling something out of the sky. I'm not sure, what kinds of triggers would cause a person to want to touch, the stove, other than for cooking. But of course, I don't have dementia. So if they're thinking that's the piano or that's the table on which they're playing cards or what have you, then we can't join that reality at all.
Well, let me say something that, maybe it's snakes, maybe it's not. My mother died a few months ago. She lived out of state, a couple thousand miles away. And my stepfather has, I guess, mild to moderate dementia right now. And he can't do anything that is a significant novel experience, because whenever he goes out of his routine, it causes frustration and sometimes anger and disorientation and stuff. He used to like cruising a lot. And I was talking to him on the phone yesterday, and he hasn't gone on a cruise for about 3-4 years since he's been in Alzheimer's. And he told me yesterday that he wants, he's thinking about going on a cruise in January. And I'm thinking, well, this could be really dangerous if he goes on a cruise by himself, and hopefully he won't do any off the boat excursions. But even there's just so many new and different things, and it seems like a crazy thing to want to do. But should I, and I kind of went along with it. I didn't say, you're an idiot, don't go on a cruise, because I don't want him to think that it's unpleasant to talk to me. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to be the nag that is always, being difficult with him. But it does seem like a pretty bad idea for him to go on a cruise. So is that significant enough to intervene, or just kind of let him do what he wants and see what happens?
Well, I think that I would say some intervention of some kind would be necessary. Thinking back to our template, what need do you think is triggering the desire to go on the cruise? Is it happy memories of traveling with your mom? Is it Is it needing unfamiliar territory? What do you think? Do you have an idea of what the need might be?
Well, I kind of took it as being pretty much, just, it is what it is, that he likes cruising and he wants to go on another cruise. When he was going on cruises, it was the most enjoyable hobby that he had.
Mm.
And I didn't really think it was any more than that.
So it's not really under stimulation, but the cruise provided stimulation that was positive. So I guess in terms of need, maybe under stimulation isn't the best word for it, but that if we could find a way to stimulate his senses in a different way, then perhaps that might help. So that might be about, I've got a couple of ideas here. That might be about, yes, you used to go on cruises with mom all the time. Let's talk about, engaging in a conversation that would stimulate memories of happy travel with your mom might be one way, and frequently have those conversations might be one way to help provide that positive emotions around that stimulation without actually having the cruise itself. Another way to perhaps prevent this would be along the lines of, slightly different, but along the lines of, well, you used to always go with mom, who's going to be your travel buddy this time? And whereas you're not saying he can't go on a cruise, but you're saying, and you more or less can, I know you're not there, so you can't positively insist, but you can stress the importance of having a travel buddy to go with on a cruise.
Yeah. One thing is the cruise departs from Fort Lauderdale, and I remember hearing over the last few weeks the governor was having a conflict with the cruise companies about whether or not the cruise companies could require vaccination, and the governor won. So the cruise companies cannot require a COVID vaccination now, which seems so bizarre if you're 9 years old to go onto a cruise with confined space with people without a COVID vaccine. So would it make sense to bring in that angle? Like, do you really want to go on a cruise when there's people without COVID vaccines in close proximity?
I think that that's a reality you can definitely involve. Because that really does go to, this is a safety issue. And it's a very real, it's a great thought, Robert, because now the safety is not about, you can't navigate in unfamiliar territory. Now COVID's the bad guy. It's not about his skill or loss of skill. Now it's a COVID situation.
Yeah.
That's a great thought.
That helps. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Anytime, and along those lines, anytime you can make someone else or some other thing the bad guy, the better. I heard you mention you wanted your conversations with him to be pleasant because, and I'm filling in from before too, you need for him to report to you what's going on. And if he's not talking to you, then there's no way you can monitor his activities or his safety level or his emotional safety as well. So anytime you can make somebody else or some other thing the bad guy, and it helps reinforce the fact that you are solidly in this case, your stepfather's corner.
Yeah, kind of like the discussion about concern about finances and it's the scammers out there that may take advantage of you. Same type of deal. Yes.
Thinking back to last time, it's the scammers. It's not you, it's them.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm glad you asked that. I hope it helps.
I think that's our time. Thanks for the good questions and for you guys coming. Claude, I hope you come back again soon and we'll do this again.
I would love to.
Really enjoyed having you. And for anyone watching, there are 2 other parts in the series. This is on YouTube, will be on YouTube. And share the link with your friends and family or anyone you think could benefit from this really great information. We want more people to know that you're out there sharing this. So yeah, thank you so much. We appreciate it.
It's been my pleasure entirely. Thank you all. And thank you, Robert. Thank you, Lori.
Lori, thanks for joining. Yay, good to see you.
Good to see you.
Take care. Bye.
Thanks you all. Be well.